All right, I'm back. What I should have done in the first place is had 2 different things of water. So then one will be for cleaning my brush, and then for rinsing out color. And then this one will be for clean water once I've rinsed it out. And that'll work better. I always end up getting even my clean water dirty anyway, but I try. All right, so I'm going to take some lemon yellow here. I'm going to take some of that yellow oxide here. Kind of makes it, ooh, I like that. It's a nice glowy. Now I'm going to keep it a really light wash first time through, and I'm probably even going to, I think I want the inside part to be lighter than this outer part. So I'm going to start on the outside, and then I'm going to work my way in. I'm starting lighter because I can always go darker afterwards. And I'm just gonna kind of, as we move in towards the center, I'm not even gonna go in a solid block. I'm basically just gonna follow the creases of the little snail rolls, and just add a little bit at a time. I'm just gonna pull a little bit of this outside here too. Now, to really get that glow effect, you actually don't use solid yellow like you would think. The outer edges generally tend to have a little bit of like a pink color to them. So I'm going to add just a little bit of that alizarin crimson, just a tiny bit though, so you don't need much, just to this outer edge here. Now, look at that, it's already kind of starting to glow. Add a little bit more that pink. And a lot of times I almost always actually test it first here. So that's what I should do. I'm not even going to do it solid around. I'm going to have it be a little darker right here by where this thing is, and a little darker right here where her hair meets it. And I'm also going to pull a little bit of that into the actual snail shell itself, so that it's going to add a little bit of variation. So it's not just straight, solid yellow color. Now, I might actually not go any darker than that, because look at that, it's already kind of got enough of a glow. I don't think I want to do any darker. I think I actually want this right here, this white that I left right here, I want that to be the brightest spot in the whole painting, even brighter than the moon. So I'm gonna kind of feather out, because I don't want a super, I mean, look at this, I got a bit of a sharp edge there. I don't really want that to be such a sharp edge. I want it to be a nice soft edge, so it's got some good glow. It just kind of feels like it's lit up. There. So now look at that difference by just adding a little bit of that kind of orangey, a little bit of that red right on this outer edge. Really helps make this pop even more. Now notice how when I'm adding this and I'm softening it out, I don't have a lot of water on my brush. Like, it's pretty, like, it's just damp, because if I add a lot of water all the way out to here, once that water spot dries, it's going to create a sharp, crisp edge, whether I want it or not. So I don't. You might, and that's fine. So I'm just going to leave that there. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm just going to add a tiny bit more of this red. Just add a little bit of brightness. Break up the solid orange a little bit. It's looking a little solid orange. All right, so there we go. Now, the next thing that is helpful for me, I know I said a lot of people work light to dark. I usually start with my lightest spot, but I don't necessarily go light to dark in order of like then my next darkest and next darkest and next darkest. I do on like a specific part, like with this face, I'm going to do a light wash for the whole thing, and then I'll add my shadow darker spots later, and then my darkest later. But when I'm working on like a whole painting, I get my lightest spot first, and then I find it helpful to get in one of my darker shades so that I have a good idea of the range that I'm working within. So the next spot that I'm going to do is the sky around here. Now, I left it without an edge, so you can do what you want. I think what I'm going to do, oh, look at that. I've already got a, see this nice little blue spot here? That's fun. This just happens to me all the time. People who keep their edges so clean, I don't know how they do it, but I'm just going to add a little bit of water to that. A little more. Just going to let it sit for a second and then see if I can kind of rub and dab that off. But all right, so I am going to actually just go all the way to the edge, or almost to the edge with the blue. So to kind of define my space, I'm going to start with the brighter blue. And I'm just going to water it down, and I'm going to kind of use my, just a really light wash to start to just define my edge for where I'm going to go. And I'm just going to quick add a little bit of, if you leave that and let it dry, you're going to end up with a hard edge there, and you don't want that. So I'm just going to go real light wash first, just so I can get an idea of where my edge is going to be. I think break down over here, and I kind of like curved edges. If it's helpful though, like if you're struggling a little bit with getting it as straight as you want it to be, you can always use a ruler and get your outer edge there with a ruler. I kind of like mine not as perfect. Like slightly wobbly, kind of like slightly wobbly lines. As you'll notice, I actually didn't use a ruler for a lot of the, oopsie. I let this sit a little bit too long right here. So I've got a bit of a straight line there that I don't really want. Thankfully, that'll be the darkest spot, and I'll be able to smooth that over pretty easily later. Probably should have worked left to right and all the way around instead of jumping down to the bottom, but oh well, here we are. I hope at the very least with watching this tutorial that you at least feel like, you know, oh, I've got to get it perfect. There's definitely an ideal way to go about it that will give you less trouble and make things easier. But I almost always forget something in that process and drop the ball, but it's okay. All right, so that kind of establishes my boundary for the sky and the wash in the background. Okay, now notice how I didn't really fill in everywhere, but just kind of got it started. All right, now I'm gonna go with the top. I want the top to be more bluish purple. I want the bottom to be more, and actually generally always run out of space on my mixing palette. Let's see, here we go. I want turquoise. Now the turquoise and the phthalo blue, the reason I labeled them on your thing is because I always mix them up in my paint palette. And I'm gonna add a little bit of purple to that top bit. So this top part of the sky is going to have more purple in it. Now it's super helpful if you mix a large batch of the paint before you start painting, so that you don't have to keep stopping to mix like I'm doing. And I kind of want it to be lighter by the stars. I'm going to show you a trick for that. So I'm kind of going to go around this one a little bit here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add more water, and more, like when I get close to the star, and more paint as I get further away from the star. Now, watercolor has a tendency to dry quick. So if you want to keep your edges soft, kind of want to work fast with it. And I'm going to worry about this part in a minute, because this is the spot where I have all of these edges. I'm going to make that top even darker. I'm not working here because I don't have an edge that I'm working right up against. That's kind of a blocked in area. So there we go. Now as I start moving down further, I'm going to be mixing in a little more of this green, and it's going to be getting lighter. So here I am going to avoid that grass a little bit. I want to keep that edge nice and soft, so I just kind of keep getting it wet. And I'm gonna now, oh man, I just dipped my dirty brush in my clean water. I told you that happens all the time, especially when I'm moving faster. So I'm going a little more green down here and a little bit lighter. So now I'm starting to kind of go in between those blades of grass, because I haven't decided yet if I want those blades of grass to be lighter or darker. do know that as it gets further down towards the horizon, I want it to get lighter and lighter. And as it gets closer to the center, I want it to be getting lighter and lighter. So I'm just going to add some clean water and kind of use my dry brush to pull some of that color away. Again, just remembering my edges. Trying not to lose the edges completely. Now this is a nice spot to where I don't have to worry too much because it's pretty close there, so I'm just gonna kind of phase that out and use that as my spot. So all right, let's see how that's looking now. Again, lighten this up a little more. All right, and now that this is almost dry up here, I'm gonna show you a cool trick for like stars. It's kind of this, on the sheet, I described it as the sparkle effect. So you see how my paper is still a little shiny? Right here's better. It looks like a matte finish, has a tiny bit of shine. That's the ideal moment now where I want to take a drop of clean water and I'm just going to dab it right where I want it to be. Kind of want it to go up a little bit from here, out a little bit. And so you see that? It's actually pushing the blue out of the way. You don't want to use a crazy amount of water. It doesn't take much, just a little bit. So a lot of times I kind of wipe my tip of my brush off on the edge of the rim and just kind of do that a couple times and it'll keep pushing it. I'm gonna add a few of those little sparkle things around here. You may remember in art class, you might have done something with salt, which is pretty cool too. You can do that, but this is just another option. And I find that this often, using clean water, seems to actually get it back to the original white a lot better. So now over here, it's a little less shiny, more matte, so that's just right. I'm just gonna kind of be dabbing tiny little drops on. I wanna kind of pull away from the star by adding some more paint, or I mean more water, just clean water right close to the edge. I accidentally got a little bit of paint on that star. And I'm gonna dab a little bit on the sides to give me a few more stars. Now, watch what happens is it, see how this part in the middle is dry? Now watch, I'm putting little dabs of paint and it's just sitting right on top. It's not spreading. And then look over here, I'll show you what happens when it's more wet. So this is pretty shiny still. I'm gonna put a dab of paint there, and it's still gonna work and it's gonna spread, but it's gonna spread around a lot more and kind of mix a little more with the blue paint as opposed to creating kind of that sharper look there, which, I mean, I kind of like. I don't want that many, so I'm just gonna kind of blur some of those together. I kind of like that as it's generally stars are more white and bright up towards the top, and then they kind of fade and get a little softer. They're a little less sharp and crisp as it gets down towards the horizon. So, all right, look how that is turning out. See? Look at that beautiful effect. Now what I have to decide is if I want to bring it dark again back down here, or if I want to keep it light. I think I'm going to darken a bit, but I want to make it greener. So I'm going to go back to my blue and my turquoise. Use a lot more turquoise than blue this time. Get it a little wet. Now it's a little tricky because this is already kind of dried. So I'm just going to try to feather that with a damp brush in a little bit, but now I think just try to get here. And the reason I want to go darker here is I want her dress to pop a little more. So as you're thinking about your overall color, you're also thinking about value. Now I'm going to try to, before this dries and gets a hard edge, I'm just going to take a, like dab a lot of the paint off my brush so it's not a wet brush. It's just barely damp. All right, now I'm going to take it, continue it on this side. But so you want to be thinking about the value as well and contrast. So that is the difference between like the light and the dark. And if you have contrast and it's done well, then it'll help certain parts of your painting pop and it'll draw emphasis. And what happens if you don't have, if you have it all over the place as far as values, what'll happen is when people look at it, their eye starts fighting for where to look. And it's not really sure, wait, is this the main spot? Should I be looking here? Should I be looking here? And it's amazing how much you just feel a little bit confused. So, all right, I think I like that. There's this nice gradient of greenish blue to kind of a, it's a blue, but it's got a little tiny bit of purple. Not tons, but a tiny bit. And watch what happens. So you know how I put those drops of paint or drops of water on the dry spot? I hadn't been dry very long and I just let them sit there for a couple minutes. And now watch this as I just kind of dab them up. And what you're going to get is you're going to get kind of crisper. You're going to kind of get these sharper spots. Not necessarily as white, but yeah. Still, oh, look at that. Ugh. This is the story of my life. You can tape around the edges too if you want to keep a sharp, clean edge. Just don't use Scotch tape. Don't use well, really any type of strong tape. What I use is something called frog tape. Which is, looks like this. It's like a painter's tape, or you can use like just a regular painter's tape. I found the frog tape works a lot better. The painter's tape, sometimes water still seeps under there. But I like that frog tape, or some people use washi tape as well. And I think that looks pretty cool. So yeah. All right, so now I have a little bit better idea of the two values that I'm working with, because outside here is kind of my darker spots. I might make a few of these little things a little darker. Oh, I forgot, I gotta finish filling in there. The key is trying to keep it consistent with the paint that's on the other side. So here I'm just going right in between. Now if I was doing these branches here green, you could just go right over top, and because you're just going to cover them again, which is pretty cool. But I'm going to do mine more like the, well, I was going to do it kind of like the brown there. We will see. I might change my mind. I change my mind all the time. And part of that is you can create, I mean, it's good to come up with a plan and try to work some of this stuff out beforehand. And actually with a lot of my other paintings, especially my fairy ones, I will actually do color studies before I even start painting. And that's really helpful because then half the time I've got an idea, and then when I actually put it to paper, it doesn't look as good as I thought it was gonna look. And I then changed my mind. So it's nice if you can work that stuff out ahead of time. So if you really wanna take your time with this painting and do it super well, you would do a color study first. And so I would take like a quick sketch of this, not a really detailed one, but just a quick sketch of this, and test out the different colors, see how they work with each other, and see how it works like in the composition too, if there's any difference there with how that looks. Dab some of this up carefully. Okay, I'm gonna make, and you see how there's just these little streaks of water here? Not very much, but I'm just gonna kind of make those more green. And then same for right here. Fill in this spot here. It's a little bit of a solid block of color here, so I'm just adding a little bit more of a gradient. Just gonna dry out my brush and just kind of blend that line. Lighten this up a little bit too. To pull paint off, you just get your paintbrush wet with a little bit of clean water. Get it wet, and then dry it and pull it off. So like right here, it kind of went over a little bit. So I've got a damp brush. I'm just kind of putting some paint on there. And look right here, see I've got these kind of crisp lines right here with the blue mat, the moon. And I'm just gonna kind of take my, again, not wet brush, just slightly damp brush. It's amazing how much I can do with that. Dry it off even more. And try to kind of blend that line a little bit. There we go. That looks better. All right. So that's kind of how we're looking right now.